issue on FDI policy which I wish to discuss. You say FDI in defense is banned. FDI and multi-brand retail is banned. You look at Trent. I can take names here, you will forgive me, I mean if you do. You look at ITC. Both these companies have significant amounts of FDI. How are they in multi-brand retail? Why? How are they in brand? Because the policy is fallacious. The policy says that if you have ownership and control, that means if you have 51% of ownership of a company and 49% is foreign, you are deemed an Indian company. So strictly speaking today, if I keep 51% shareholding, allow 49% from whoever it may be, including the biggest arms manufacturer in the world, I can get into defense manufacturing without violating the policy. This is an issue which has been laid on the table nearly 2 years ago, that what can be done indirectly should be allowed to be done directly. We have argued it earlier. Indirectly, today it is possible for FDI to be invested in defense and multi-brand. Directly, it is not possible. To allow it to be direct. So these are issues relating to FDI. First, its small amount. Second, the inefficacy of its policy. The third is the final myth of the FDI. How much FDI are you getting? 25 billion. That's about 1.3% of GDP. How much is our capital formation? 35%. That is, FDI forms only 3% of our capital formation. Why are we wasting our time, energy, political capital to reform FDI and multi-brand retail? Why are you having so many discussions when usefully you can do a lot of other things? Especially as one last issue, does FDI really depend on policy of the government? The Marwadis and the old entrepreneurs who invested in other countries, they did not use an FDI policy. Why did they invest? They invested because of good infrastructure. They were allowed labor market flexibility. There was a reasonable financial transaction depth. So FDI doesn't depend on policy. So therefore, in conclusion, what I would like to say is, my apologies for the brief presentation. FDI is not cut out what it's made to be. FDI is not the solution to the problems. What is the problem? What is the solution? The first, I'm just offering off the cuff of my hand 3 or 4 active solutions for the government of India. See, sitting in the state government, I freely and gratis give advice to the government of India. My state government is not upset with me, and the government of India cannot listen to me, so I cannot be afforded to do anything I like. The first thing is, government of India should be more proactive. That is, our foreign policy should be geared to domestic interests. My feeling is, today our foreign policy is geared to high principles. The principles of non-alignment, the principles of Panchsheel, the principles of friendship, the principles of neighbors. It is not the principle that my industry should benefit. I say this with all seriousness, because I think this is a point which FAPSI and all industry of representatives should take up. I have had my share of industry and trade negotiations when I was in the government of India. Nowhere does anybody even think that in my delegation I should have industrial members or trade members. But when you go to Geneva, you look at the US members. There the official members are 2, the trade members are 50. There should be a more proactive engagement and an insistence from industry side to press their point of view in international trade negotiations. Make no mistake about it, this is the future of India. The free trade agreements being signed will have created already significant problems for a number of industries. Some of them even closed down. Classic example is the Indo-Japan early harvest agreement. Indo-Thailand. Industries closed down. I don't wish to discuss that. So industry should be more proactive in this. They should say, I want to sit at this table because what you decide, I am affected. This has partially succeeded, though not so successfully, in regard to the Indo-European trade agreement. where automobile manufacturers made a very passionate plea, and Government of India listened to them. There has been some success. It is not that it is not happening. This should be done stronger. That is one of my suggestions for FAPSI. The other, of course, is we have to improve governance. There is no two ways about it. Enough has been said about it. I don't wish to take about. I just wish to place on record the fact that governance has to improve. The third issue is revenue enhancement. Traditionally, the problem with the failing economy, which leads to the falling rupee, is that you need fiscal consolidation. You need more revenue. You need to spend less. I would urge that you look at revenue enhancement more than expenditure reduction for two reasons. First reason is there are already two items on the agenda for revenue enhancement, which again people like FAPSI should be pressing, and in my view they are not pressing hard enough. If you will forgive me, Devara Garu, Srinivas Garu, my feeling is that industry associations know the right answer, but they don't say it loud enough for fear of hurting the fellows in power. They are too polite, or they what they call they pull punches. They know what to say, but they don't say it. I would urge that you don't pull your punches anymore. And there you have two things for you on the table for which you should refuse to pull punches and you should argue very strongly. I refer to the goods and service tax and I refer to the direct taxes code. See, the problem is, especially goods and service tax, it is a debate between the central government and the state governments. There is something very wrong in this debate. The debate, I'm sure people like Mr. Parekh will agree with me, should be a triangular debate. The other party should be trade and industry who are affected by this act. The GST Act, when we sign up, who will get affected? All people in this room will have to get affected. They will, what is taxable, what is not taxable, what is the threshold, these things you guys will get affected. You guys are not participating in the debate. I know because I sit on some of the chairs of the GST in India, in the national chairs, I don't see enough noise made by industry. Even if you can't contribute to the debate, why are you not asking, I wish to sit on the debate of GST. I have not seen so far a firm demand that I want to sit on this debate. Who are you? I'm being very blunt with you. Who are you to discuss my future without consulting me? Why are you not asking in such blunt terms? It is time you did, because there are a number of issues are coming which will affect your trade. I refer specifically to IGST, Interstate Goods and Service Tax. There are a number of models being floated around. Some atrocious models are being discussed, and it's going to affect you. So, these are issues which you need to look at. DTC you need to look at. That India must spend more on lifting its millions from poverty. We have a strong responsibility. And the hypothesis that such spending will impede growth, which is what the current thesis is the delusion of a self-centered middle class. This is not my words. These are the words of Amartya Sen in his latest book. He's written a book called Uncertain Glory, India and Its Contradictions. It has just come out recently. To be very frank, I have not read this book. I have had the dubious distinction of quoting from it, quoting from a review of the book. Even that review is not published in India. It was published in the New York Times day before yesterday. But the fact does remain. One thing is there. It cannot be said that the large expenditures will impede growth. Therefore, we should not do the right to food bill. Therefore, we should not do that. But because the difference between the poorest and the richest is increasing at such a large rate, you cannot survive unless you do something for the poor. That is the reason why in this debate on failing economy and falling rupee, I would urge some kind of constraint on expenditure compression. So I would strongly encourage you to talk about revenue expansion.